Hi, my name is Scarlett Lewis, and I'm the founder of the Jessie Lewis ChooSELove movement. I'd like to welcome you, the listeners, to the ChooSELove podcast, a place where we come together in love and discuss how we can all choose this in our daily lives to take what we've learned and use it to help make a safer, more peaceful and loving world. And Dr. Spyros has been practicing internal medicine for 20 years at Danbury Hospital and served as chief of hospital medicine from 2016 to 2017. He is now part of the Danbury Medical Group, and we are so blessed to have them on our podcast this morning. Hello, Dr. Spyros.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good to be with you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and say why you're focused in the area that you're focused on now?
Sure. My name is Spyros Smith. I was a hospital doc for 20 years, and for the last 4.5 years, I've been the medical director of the Danbury Medical Group here in Danbury. I was also the director of patient experience for 3 years at the hospital, and had a passion for bringing compassion and empathy back into medicine and to the world in general. And that's, I think, what stimulated my this conversation this morning when Pam Brown reached out to me.
Absolutely.
My pet peeve or gripe, I guess, with the world right now is that we're going down a path where I see less and less compassion, empathy, however you want to call it. And it's interesting because empathy, the way we use it in the States, is not the way the original word was conceived. So if you say empathy in Greek, which is a Greek word, it's actually not a good thing. It's a bad thing. So I prefer to use compassion, being part Greek.
That is so interesting that you say that, because
empathy was taken as it was misconstrued as a word when it was brought over and translated. Empathy means the wrong form of passion in a maniacal sense.
So is it originally a Greek word?
Of course, yes, absolutely.
And what is the definition in Greek?
So it's empathos. It means a misguided passion. In a almost a maniacal sense. Not so when I used it, not knowing that, I used that in Greece, as I'm part Greek and visit every year, and they said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, empathy. And they said, no, that's not what we mean by empathy. So I've adjusted since finding that out years ago to compassion instead.
That is so interesting, and I want to tell you, my mom just walked in.
With Dr. Chris Cook. I don't know if you're familiar with Chris Cook. He was a professor at Western Connecticut and left, and Chris and I had multiple conversations about compassion. Yeah.
Well, I'm at my mom's right now because I left my computer in her car last night, and she just came in and she goes, "I love him." And then when you mentioned Dr. Chris Cook, she came back in and she's going like this, and we're doing this surprise look because, of course, Dr. Chris Cook is a founding board member of the Jessie Lewis ChooSELove movement. Of course.
I haven't seen Chris for years, but we were very good friends. And when he did the Compassion Achiever, I brought him to the hospital for a pep talk to try to get people stimulated.
Absolutely. And so his understanding of compassion and empathy, he wants to make sure everybody knows the difference. And this is so important. Every time I speak to teachers, I explain this to them because there's so much focus on empathy, but empathy lights up the same receptors in our brain as physical pain. Empathy is actually a painful process.
That's exactly right. And that's how it was construed. So empathy meaning physical pain, meaning misguided passion from the pain, etc. That's exactly what the root comes from.
That's amazing.
And why Chris also had used compassion and not empathy as his go-to word.
That's amazing. So we have this formula for choosing love. So for being able to thoughtfully respond to whatever is going on in your life with love. In other words, being in control, having your locus of control inside, and being able to choose your response and to choose love in your response. And the formula starts with courage, because courage is the most important character value that underlies all the rest. We need courage to do just about everything right in our
Courage,
lives.
you're right. Absolutely.
And then the rest comes from Jesse's message that he left on our kitchen chalkboard shortly before he died, that spurred this entire movement: nurturing, healing, love. Nurturing means loving kindness and gratitude. Healing means forgiveness and love. And Dr. Cook helped me comprise this last character value. Love is compassion in action. So compassion is identifying a need and then actively doing something to help ease that need. So when you have the courage to be grateful, even when things aren't going your way, the courage to forgive, even if the person who hurt you isn't sorry, doesn't care, doesn't know, or forgive yourself, and have the courage to step outside of your own busyness, distraction, even pain and suffering to help somebody else, you've chosen love, and you've made the world through your actions a safer, more peaceful and loving place. That is the basis of the Choose Love movement. And you did that when you made the move from the hospital to the Danbury Medical Group. You were practicing compassion in action because you saw a lack of compassion and you wanted to put that back into the medical field. How are you doing that?
Well, we're doing that by embracing, there are about 36 staff members in our group, and we practice it every day. Don't do unto others, etc. So that every interaction we have, whether it's front office staff, whether it's nursing, our interactions with patients, whether it's that phone call, that irate patient who's stuck in an ER or something to that effect, the response has to be one of compassion and not one of reaction. And all too often we'll react. So when somebody throws something at us in a negative, we react with negativity. So we're bringing our baggage to the table as well. And no good can come of that. So trying to understand the other person and recognizing that there are very, very few evil people, if you will. I hate to use the term, but it's most people will come around. At least most of our patients will, if you show them compassion. And so bringing the art of that back into medicine, whether that be at the front end or in our nursing or our doctors or students that come through here, it has really been the goal. To not just create, and I've taught all my life, I've taught in medical college, both New York Medical College and the University of Vermont, and now in the office with residents and medical students. Knowledge is one thing, and of course knowledge is power, and you have to have that in medicine, but an equally important part of medicine is having that compassion and that emotional intelligence to be able to make the patient feel comfortable with you and open up to you and tell you. Otherwise you miss out on half the story. If they freeze up and they don't feel comfortable in your presence, and that level of comfort comes from compassion and from being genuine. So it's an art, and it also comes from the heart. It's not just the. So we did resident simulation labs at the hospital that we set up with Jay Weiner, a good friend of mine, Dr. Weiner, and in that sim lab we had a module called the difficult patient, where we would prep the patient to attack the resident or medical student, whoever was going through the module, and not attack physically, but attack verbally, and I'm upset, and why you guys don't know what you're doing, and things like that. And the response to that can be scripted, but unless it's coming from the heart, that patient doesn't feel it. And the powerful part of it was that when the resident really reacted in a compassionate way, scripted or not scripted, it would take the patient, who, by the way, was a paid patient, it's a sim lab, right? It would take the patient off guard. Despite the fact that the patient wasn't truly angry and was just scripting, they didn't know how to respond. They were taken aback, and we had these little earpieces, and we would prompt them, come on, be rude again, and they couldn't. So the power of compassion and love, and of course, compassion comes from inner love, right? So love for doing what you do, for giving back to humankind, and not really bringing baggage to the table in that kind of interaction.
So
So
important.
so for example, if somebody says something verbally abusive in medicine, and you say, well, you seem to be bothered about that, in that tone. So my facial expression, as opposed to you seem to be bothered by that. The same scripted message, very different tone and very different level of compassion on both responses.
Amazing. That is amazing. And we need compassion in our interaction with our doctors so that we trust you, and to increase that level of trust. And then when we trust someone, doesn't healing accelerate? So I trust
Absolutely.
what you're telling me. And yeah.
Without question. I mean, we have there was a recent study, I think a few years ago, out of UCLA, where they took and may my UCLA colleagues forgive me if I'm misquoting a part of the study, but they pulled random people off the street. And I think there were about 60 to 100 patients. And of Los Angeles, they tried to do this in age-appropriate fashion. They brought them in, and half of them got blood tests looking for inflammatory markers, cytokines, interleukins, substances that we know cause inflammation in the body. Right off the bat, measure levels of them. And the other half went into mindful awareness, guided imagery for about a half an hour or so. And then they had their substances measured, the same substances. And the levels were very unequal in that the group that had gotten their blood drawn right away had markers of inflammation that were very high compared to the ones that had just gone through the mindful awareness. So we know that a compassionate approach, and if you feel good about the interaction with your doctor, that has a very powerful effect. And I think we now can understand also the power of prayer, for example, when they said that, a village came together and prayed for a loved one or a friend or a community member, and that loved one knew that was happening. At least part of it, and I don't want to get into that realm, but at least part of that is that feel good correlating to or changing your inflammation, your body's inflammation. So it can now be scientifically proven. It's not just, okay, yeah, feel good, and that we can quantify it. It's become granular.
And quantifying something that helps our inflammation is huge, because doesn't inflammation lead to almost everything negative that can happen to your body, including cancer?
Pretty much any disease, cardiovascular, autoimmune, cancer, you name it. So it stems from inflammation.
Amazing. In any interaction, do you think that is based on our mirror neurons? I mean, we are wired to connect with one another. So if I'm speaking with someone and I'm angry, and we react in defense of ourselves. Sometimes it's like a natural thing. You kind of, you react in freeze, fight, or flight. And sure. And then it just escalates from there. So you need a few skills and tools, some coping skills, to be able to help manage your own reaction. So in other words, to thoughtfully respond, as you were saying in the beginning, instead of react, which, by the way, is all about what we teach at the ChooSELove movement. So I love Pam she just heard your message and knew that it was so connected to what we say.
No, this is beautiful. We're definitely on the same page.
Absolutely. And I just say, can you imagine a generation that grows up with coping skills, with the understanding that whatever happens in your life, good or bad, can be used as an opportunity for growth, and given the knowledge of how to take that pain and use it, turn it into something that can help someone else? That's the world that I want to live in. That's
yeah, absolutely. You're preaching to the choir. I couldn't have put it better myself. It's important, no matter how you look at it. From my standpoint, and as a healer, as life skills, as a way of managing your own emotions throughout life. Anger doesn't bring, I mean, anger brings about nothing good, at least in the long run.
So prolonged anger is as bad for you as smoking. Is it half a pack of cigarettes
It's
a
close to
day?
that. We depending on what study you read, but we know that anger, develops a stress response, can cause vasospasm, can cause, a severe emotional response, whether it be anger, grief, etc., can cause your heart to go into failure. Basically, what we call Takotsubo's cardiomyopathy. Died of a broken heart syndrome.
Right.
We now know what that entity is. And we don't really quite understand what the cause is, but perhaps a surge of catecholamines, adrenaline, that overwhelms the heart with it. So we know that it can have some very real physical ill effects.
And Dr. Spyros, we are maybe coming out of a little bit this period of a year and a half at least of social distancing. Social distancing is an oxymoron to what we need as human beings. We need connection. We need one another. And so what are you seeing in your practice relative to this time in COVID? And, I'm going to ask, what are your recommendations for parents with kids that are struggling? And it's not just the kids, it's us big kids as well.
It's not just the kids. No, you put it very well. So what we've seen during COVID is a mixed bag of tricks. About half of our patients that were fairly isolated to begin with, or didn't have strong family ties, spend many hours sitting in front of a computer, either due to work or other reasons, aren't doing well. Anxiety, depression, pill upon pill, and just an inability to get out of that rut. As you said, human beings are, very, very correctly put, are social animals, social beings. The other half actually did better during COVID, strangely enough, because they were able to get away from that grind of commute, 2-hour commute and 10 hours at a computer. They spend more time with family. They got out in nature more. And human beings weren't meant to be in front of a screen like this or on cell phones all day. They were meant to be outside. So I think the uniform message we've given is get out, walk more, spend more time with family. Okay, yes, you can't socialize with 50 people. Socialize with, if you have a strong social support network, socialize with your immediate family. Get to know them, get the emotional response. It's amazing how many emotions have come up during this, and emotions that people didn't know they had about family members, good and bad with it. So those that have been able to use it constructively, get out, do more physical activity, have done better, and those that haven't and were more socially isolated have really gone downhill. So we are seeing a pandemic of anxiety and depression. We were anyway, but with COVID, it became that fivefold.
Right. Going into COVID, we were having that. So I call it a super pandemic because I've been looking for a word that's above a pandemic and I can't find it. So I call those super pandemics. And you said you made a remark that it was 50-50. So 50.
It's not, yeah, that's a very generic, statement on my part. It's anecdotal, of course, but about half of my patients that came in couldn't cope with what happened with COVID.
Yeah. Wow.
And the other half, and again, we're in a kind of a suburban rural area, so we do have access to nature. My friends in the city had it was probably 80-20 as far as they really didn't do well. We look outside and all we can see is asphalt, and nothing's moving, and they went into this isolation mode that was horrendous.
And so so for people who are listening, who are struggling because they have felt very isolated and they are having anxiety, their kids are anxious, what would you tell them?
I would tell them get out in nature as much as possible. Walk, take walk around a lake, walk in the woods. Get out and spend more time.
Yeah.
Spend more time with the family outdoors. Get them away from devices, which is something I've been preaching even before COVID. I think that yes, technology is very useful. Obviously, we're having this Zoom meeting, which is we wouldn't be able to have 10, 15 years ago, but and that's great. But again, we're not meant to be around technology continuously all day. And I think for a child's brain or a young teenager's brain, they're meant to develop in a multifaceted approach, not just on a phone all day where they're doing this and responding. Our ability to critically think, the deep thinking mechanisms are going away. And that's not for me, that's for the neuroplasticians of the world that are now doing functional MRIs and PET scans and seeing that when you're on sure, you can multitask and go from one task to the other and do it very well, but that's not using your critical thinking, deep thinking mechanisms. And it doesn't light up on that functional MRI. So that the worry is amongst the neuroplasticians of the world, and I happen to train under a phenomenal one, Bill Ramachandran out of UCSD. He's the director of the Cognitive Center at UCSD, University of California, San Diego. And we know that our ability to sleep on a problem and wake up and say, oh, got it, eureka, that eureka moment, that deep thinking moment is quickly being lost because of technology. So knowing that, when I was raising my children, they're both in college, one's in medical school, the other's in vet school, they didn't get phones until they were 18. So they went to college and got their first cell phone. But no, they had computers for work, for schoolwork, of course, and all that, and they knew how to use them and had a school email and all that, but they didn't belong to any social media and didn't have their cell phones until they got more mature age. And I thought that was their mother did most of that work. Their mother was my wife Lisa was adamant about that. Stick to the basics. Learn farming. Be in nature. Learn how to think. Learn how to be compassionate. And of course, she was instrumental in with my support. But it took two. To do this. If one parent disagrees, or if you succumb to the peer pressure, etc., it goes by the wayside. And they did very well after the initial, hey, everybody has a cell phone and we don't.
Right.
And we said, look, it's your dad's a doctor. We both grew up this way, and we have a little knowledge on this thing. This is no good. And it took them a few years to convince them, but now they're seeing it when they're in college. Seeing the ill effects in other people around them. And my son's a fifth-year medical student in Dublin, Ireland, and said,
Incredible.
boy, you know what? We're now seeing all the detrimental effects that you guys were preaching about 15 years ago.
Wow. And
not to say, I have my cell phone right here. It's a useful tool. It's not, I need it. I need to get texts. I need to get emails, but it's a very easy tool to abuse.
That's amazing. And I think just by you saying that, you're giving permission for other people to limit their kids' cell phone use. But it's so much easier to just be like, I literally go out to dinner and I see a family of four. You've got two parents, they're sitting around a table, both on their cell phone. They've got their kids sitting across from each other with iPads. And it's all that I can do to not go over and say, you have two live children in front of you, and you could be present in the moment. You could be learning.
Interact, exactly. How are you going to pick up on emotional intelligence without interaction? And we were the same way. If we went out to dinner with friends and with kids, but when our kids were younger, and we did frequently, and the kid did this and was looking at the cell phone, my wife would turn around and say, no, that's not acceptable. And if you can't understand that as a parent, then we have no business socializing with you. We're on a different frequency. It's not about being mean or angry or anything like that. It's about saying, look, this is not acceptable social behavior, and we don't want to show that. We don't want to make that acceptable for our children.
It's incredible. And, I raised my boys on a farm, and I did that intentionally because I wanted them to be around animals. I wanted them to be outside. I always thought it was a good day when they came in and their fingernails were dirty, because it really meant they were in the soil and having fun. And that was a huge thing for me. And so I have to say, thank goodness, we didn't have a TV. You and I are so alike, because I realized one day, oh my gosh, I spend more time commuting and at work than I do with my boys during the week. I literally unplugged my TV, donated it to Goodwill on my way to work the next day. And we read, we played games, we talked, we played, and it was enough. It was enough. And when you think about this thing, I think that this is, I think I'm addicted to it.
We all are. I think we all are. That's
Okay.
the thing. Yeah.
I'm coming out right now saying I'm addicted to my cell phone.
Yeah, well, we all are. There's no question about it. Yeah.
And
Some more than others, and to try to limit that addiction is the question, not whether we're addicted or not.
well, for me, the bombshell that you dropped was that it limits critical thinking. And I don't know how you, if you don't have your critical thinking abilities, then you can be led down a path that is not good for you. You don't have any control in your life if you can't critically think about situations and make choices that are in your own best interests. This
Absolutely.
is disturbing.
It's very disturbing, and I think you saw the Chinese limit screen time in a very, of course, dictatorial fashion, no question, but they did it for a reason. It wasn't a brainless move. Now you can argue the way they did it and all that, of course, but they did it based on research and science, and seeing that the body mass index of young people was going up, and also their ability to critically think and emotional intelligence and all that stuff. So that there was wisdom to the move. The way the method, of course, was a little dictatorial, but.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, I do want to say that you also have a background in nutritional biochemistry.
I do, yes.
And so how does that factor into your practice?
That factors in a huge way, 15 times a day, and that I use nutrition, and I believe in prevention, not just you come in, you have condition, me give you pill, bye-bye, come back in 3 months, we raise increase your dose of pill, bye-bye again. It's a two-way street. I need engagement from my patients, so my patients really need to use diet, exercise, and the tools we talk about. And it may take another 10, 15 minutes. It's not fiscally sound to do this, but it's the right thing to do. So we use nutrition on an every patient basis, whether it be hypertension, diabetes. We've had diabetics come off of 3 of their medications and drop their hemoglobin A1Cs from 9 to 6 in a 6-month period, those that engage and do things the right way. By lowering their simple, carbohydrate, sugar load on a daily basis, getting out, walking more, the tidbits like that. So, nutritional biochemistry, metabolic biochemistry it's huge. The NHS in Britain about 2 months ago came out with a statement, and they normally don't. They're not a medical body. They're more of a Medicare-like body, the National Health Service. Based on a population study of, I think, 15, 20 years, and again, forgive me if I'm misquoting the exact nature of it, but the message was there's a 50% reduction in cardiovascular disease and cancer in patients that followed a predominantly plant-based diet and exercised aerobically daily. And they quantified both as to what percentage plant-based, and it was about 95%, and daily aerobic activity of at least an hour or so. And on top of that, people that had sedentary jobs like 8 to 10 hours of sitting, those that got up and walked around during that work time, as opposed to those that, compared to those that didn't do that, there was a difference in outcomes again with it. So it's very, very powerful stuff.
That's incredible.
It's an incredible tool to, we've had people come off of their blood pressure medications by weight loss and low sodium diets alone. The diabetes issue is easy. Cholesterol modification. the Cleveland Clinic came out about a year or two ago and said, if America, and it's a bold statement, but if America was vegan, there would be no cardiovascular disease in the States. Now that's not advocating everybody turn vegan overnight, but it gives you a tool to say, well, hold on, inflammation, and it makes sense. We've polluted our environment so much at this point that, whether you're talking about the chicken you buy in the supermarket or the meat, etc., that isn't the same animal that our ancestors bred on the farm locally. So it does follow. It makes sense that the more plant-based and the more organic, the less pollutants you have in your diet, the less inflammation you have, the less inflammation, the less disease. Understanding that we're all going to get some level of inflammation from our surroundings, because there's no way to live a completely pollutant-free, pesticide, chemical-free life.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
That's my baseline conversation with patients.
Amazing. It takes a little, but you're asking them to put in a little bit of effort. It's like we're such a society that's immediate pleasure, right? I mean, with the diabetic, they can eat cookies and take a shot, or they can monitor their diet and eat well and exercise every day. And that takes more effort, but there's that tremendous long-term gain. But I think exactly. that, we're predisposed to those simple pleasures. And that's even when it comes to anxiety or feeling uncomfortable, you can have a drink, you can do some sort of drug, you can watch Netflix, you can eat, or
you can take your SSRI, your medication.
You can take your medication, or you can do something more naturally based. And I bet, are there foods that you can eat to reduce anxiety?
Well, absolutely. So there's a great book. I met this great psychiatrist out in the Twin Cities about a decade ago with some people, I think, as well, that have been involved in your movement. His name was Henry Emmons. And Henry was a bona fide psychiatrist, but he wouldn't give you pills unless your life depended on it, unless you were on the edge and ready to jump off a cliff or something to that effect. Otherwise, he wrote a book called The Chemistry of Joy. And Henry used diet. So he used, for example, cashews that are rich in serotonin, nuts, plant-based, organic grains like the ancient grains, the quinoas of the world, things like that, to battle conditions such as anxiety, depression. And, of course, if somebody had bipolar disorder and was maniacal, of course, they would get medication. He wasn't off the wall in that sense, but he was big on diet. And again, it was a plant-based diet that seemed to be the friendliest for these types of conditions. Again, rich in, plant-based is easy to say, but rich in nuts, legumes, things of that nature. So it's a whole, that's a whole hour discussion in of its own right. But using mindful awareness, whether that be traditional Chinese medicine or just a breathing app or whatever you call it, yoga, whatever it is that takes your mind into one realm and not 15 at the same time, concentrating on one thing, that's calming the anxious mind, literally. So teaching patients techniques, but that's not something that develops overnight. That's something that takes years of practice and is a work in progress and takes time. It takes time to sit back. I don't know if you've ever tried to take 10 deep breaths and count in and count out and just keep your mind on the breathing. It's hard to get past 3 or 4 without thinking about 15 different other things with it. So it's like training. You don't become a professional athlete overnight. But it's so useful in bringing down inflammation and in allowing you to connect with your inner self, your emotional well-being, your emotional intelligence, all rely on that.
So mindful awareness is one of the treatments that you offer your patients who are dealing with anxiety and PTSD.
Absolutely.
And yes, I use mindfulness every single day. I bring my thoughts to the present moment, which is the only place where life is happening. And
Exactly.
it is also a way to remind your brain that it's safe, because right here, right now, we're normally safe. And all of this anxiety, isn't it simply our brains not feeling safe?
It stems from insecurity, absolutely.
Yeah. So you use guided imagery techniques. What are those?
Well, guided imagery is basically in our basic form in a primary care environment is visualize something that brings you peace, whether it's the lake, the woods, a beautiful painting, and try to just sit there and think about the lake, the woods, the painting, whatever it is that brings you, into a calmer state. What brings you joy? And hopefully it's not the computer or your cell phone that you're looking at, but it's and trying to concentrate on that in short spurts, so for 2 or 3 minutes at a time, and doing it multiple times during the day, and then taking out a little longer. And again, that's a time commitment, but if you think about it, what's 15, 20 minutes to practice some of that a day, if it's going to bring inflammation down, if it's going to make you healthier, both emotionally and physically. And the two are interconnected. You can't have physical health without mental health, and vice versa.
So
And
I guess,
the ancient healers figured that out a long time ago, and said that there's a from Hippocrates that says healthy mind, healthy body, and vice versa. Whether so the exercise of the world, but the mental exercise as well. Not to forget, hey, okay, I went for a jog, but I'm not giving my brain any time off.
right. I mean, I think maybe the medical field kind of went the way that we have gone too, kind of taking the easier route, which is, oh, you're fatigued, you are not feeling well, you have dark thoughts. So the cluster of symptoms. So it sounds like you're depressed. Here you go. Here's a pill to help that. And we're very happy to say, I could just take this pill every day and feel better because it increases my serotonin. Okay, that's easy. But really,
You
that's
hit the nail on the head, and it doesn't even increase the serotonin. What it does is your whatever your body's making in serotonin, it keeps the serotonin between synapses, the nerves, one nerve to the other, neurotransmitter, right? So it keeps that serotonin in that gap for a little bit longer. So it's not that it's replenishing serotonin. It's not. The only way you replenish serotonin is by the foods you eat and what your body makes, et cetera, based on that. So that's the easy fix. And unfortunately, our system, our healthcare system, pays the same amount of money, whether a psychiatrist, psychologist gives you an SSRI, a medication, and sends you on your way in 10 minutes, or if they spend an hour for that same condition and say, well, let's do a little bit more work here. Let's see if we can avoid, we're not good at doing that. And the people that are good at doing that are a cash only model. So they don't take insurance. And there are several people in our community that do incredible work with cognitive behavioral therapy, with guided imagery, with bringing people off medications. I've had several of mine that have come off of medications using it. But it's a time commitment and it's a money commitment. You can then submit the bill to your insurance company, but there's no guarantee that they'll pay any portion of it. And so most people will say, well, I can't afford that. And the second best is to send them to a psychiatrist's office or institute where they see a licensed social worker and psychiatrist. But again, that's most of the times that ends up in here's take a pill and go away. And it's not the psychiatrist or psychologist's fault. It's just the way the system's set up. So we need a major revamping of our healthcare system. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening in our lifetime. And that it's a hot potato nobody's touching, and I don't think they're going to touch it with this administration or the next, for that matter. And when they do touch it, it'll take another 5-10 years to implement. So we're talking about a good 20 years down the road before anything of substance happens to our healthcare system, and that's if somebody ever decides to tackle it. The special interests are just way too high. Our lobbyists in Washington have done a disservice to the American people. I'm not being political. This is coming from my heart and my 25 years in healthcare. And I think most of my colleagues feel the same way, that it's taken away from the provider patient relationship, whether you're an APRN or a PA or a doctor or a nurse, it doesn't matter. It's financials getting in the way of that healing bond.
Well, there's not a lot of money in
The way the
wellness.
old GP used to know you when you were in your little rural area of Maine, et cetera, and that GP knew everybody in the village, knew what made you tick, knew your mom and dad and brothers and sisters, and really could treat you in a substantial manner. Yeah.
In a holistic way. And there's not a
Holistic way.
lot of money in wellness.
No, there
In
isn't.
people
So
being
that's why you
well.
see these models of primary care where you're seeing, 4 or 5 patients an hour. How can you see somebody in 10 minutes, talk to them, treat them, do all of the bureaucratical stuff on the computer, click here, click there, bill, and see the next? I mean, it's physically impossible. You can do it and put out a fire if somebody has a sore throat or a cough and say, okay, I looked in your throat, take this antibiotic, go away. But you can't do anything more than that. You certainly can't deal with more complex issues like hypertension, diabetes, metabolic syndrome in that short of a period of time. And if you don't, then you're not fiscally sound, and then you have to belong to a corporation or a larger healthcare organization. So the days of the private practitioners or the private groups are quickly dwindling, in my opinion.
Yeah, speaking of fires, I know that there are chemical imbalances that people have that can be corrected with drugs, with pharmaceuticals. I'm just curious myself, what is the percentage, just in your opinion, of people that come in that literally have a chemical imbalance that should be medicated, with those that could handle the problem themselves with education and a little bit of guidance and direction, like mindfulness and guided imagery and things that
Depends
you
on the
teach, and
condition.
actually
If you're
things that
talking
we
about
teach.
Yeah, no, I mean, it depends on the condition. So if you're talking about complex bipolar or schizophrenia or something like that, of course, there's a chemical imbalance. Of course, you need medication, but in conjunction with a good dietary regimen, exercise, etc. That's a different story. Now, if you're talking about anxiety and depression, that too can be genetic and run in families, but is much more amenable to the mindful awareness and nutritional approach. There's no harm in trying unless that person is again on the edge and severely depressed, where you're not going to get to them in time with nutrition and mindful awareness. So percentage wise, it's hard to. It depends on the age group you're talking about. It's highly variable. What I am seeing is a huge number, and what we're all seeing in here, there are 10 practitioners in our group. Anxiety is in the younger population, the under 30s, is skyrocketing. And that is very amenable to the stuff we just talked about, and less related to chemical imbalance and more related to lifestyle and what's going on around them.
So there are skills and tools that
so it depends on what is right and how strong the genes are in the family. If the whole family had panic attacks on one side, then you're kind of behind the 8 ball to correct that, but make no mistake about it, you can't correct it with just a pill and come back in 3 months approach. That's regardless of what you choose to do, whether you choose to treat with pill and the person's at a 10 out of 10 of intensity of symptoms or not. You have to use nutrition, exercise, mindful awareness as adjuncts to that therapy.
Well, I know that a lot of people that are listening are going to wonder if you're taking new patients, and I'm asking for myself as well.
I'm not, unfortunately. We're all fully booked in here, but we're trying to remedy that and add some partners. So if we had a few partners retire and had to absorb their patients because we felt very emotionally bound to them, but we hopefully will remedy it within the next few months. We're adding a few practitioners, and once we can open up like that, we'll be able to open up to more patients. Because we want to do this in fairness to the patients we have. We want to be able to spend the time with them and not say, I can't see you for 2 weeks, go to urgent care.
Yes, of
course. Which is happening more often now in the medical community. So we kind of sacrifice the financial for proper care with that. It's not so. Can I see another 10 patients a day? Of course I can, but I wouldn't be doing justice to the patients I am seeing, my current patients. I'd be putting out fires. Yeah.
Understand completely.
This has been delightful. I've got to get back to practice. I
Absolutely.
look forward to speaking you offline.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This was
Thank you for the
incredible.
invite. This is a heartfelt discussion, and let's do more of them.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you
Sounds
so
good.
much. Have a great
Thanks,
day.
Scarlett. You be well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, hey, oh. It's all part of us. We can all choose love. It'll lift you up if you let it in. Let the healing begin.
Thanks for listening to the Choose Love podcast. Our positive, empowering messaging is reaching millions of people all over the planet. Join the worldwide movement to choose love. Our programming is in over 10,000 schools, homes, and communities across the country, in every state and over 112 countries and counting. We are giving individuals of all ages the essential life skills they need to flourish. You can be part of the solution too. We have sponsorship opportunities available that help support us and enable you to share in helping create a safer, more peaceful, and loving world. Contact me on our website, ChooSELoveMovement.org.